Lecture test 4, video 3, and we're starting at the top of what is for me page 5, and it looks like this with the bronchioles. Talk about bronchodilation, bronchoconstriction, asthma, and so on. So, bronchodilation is an increase of the diameter of the airways, which are mostly in the class of bronchi. And when you increase the diameter, that decreases the resistance. And when you decrease the resistance, that increases the flow. And this is instigated by sympathetic activation. So sympathetic activation, get that lined up, bronchodilates, increases the diameter, which decreases resistance, which increases flow. When you make the tube bigger, you're going to move more air. And sympathetic activation will do this for us. It will cause bronchodilation because air has oxygen, and the more air we get into the lungs to the exchange surface, the more oxygen we get into the bloodstream. The more oxygen we get into the bloodstream, the plasma, the more oxygen that binds to the hemoglobin and makes oxyhemoglobin, the more oxygen we get to the tissues. And we use oxygen to make ATP. So it makes sense for sympathetic activation, fight or flight, when you are running for your life, or sword fighting for your life, whatever it is you do for your life. Hope you don't have to. But were you to have to, more oxygen is more better. Okay. Bronchoconstriction is the opposite. That's when you decrease the diameter of the bronchi, which increases the resistance, which decreases flow, which is the same thing that we talked about in chapter 21. Some semesters that is extra credit, some semesters it is not, but it's worth going through for these concepts about diameter and resistance and flow. And bronchoconstriction is caused by parasympathetic activation. If you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix, nice calm show, then you do not need enough oxygen to run from a bear or whatever it is you run from. Okay. Like, this is South Texas. We don't have bears, we have fire ants. Run from a javelina. Asthma is excessive stimulation, which causes folds in the bronchial mucosa, which blocks the airflow. Respiratory bronchioles are the smallest bronchioles. They are part of the exchange surface. Where's my pen? Pen? No. Pointer options. Pen. Pen color. Red. Okay. Respiratory bronchioles. We're learning for lab, main bronchi, lobar bronchi, segmental bronchi, and then we're skipping all of these other bronchial terms. They're like, oh look, they're bronchioles. Until for lecture we get here, the smallest ones are respiratory bronchioles. And they are important because they are part of the exchange surface in addition to the alveoli. Okay, so the different types of cells, we have a chart for that. I'll give you a second to pause and write that down. Excellent. So fun. Hey, the red still shows. Pneumocytes type 1 are the exchange surface. They are simple squamous epithelium. Pneumocytes type 2 make surfactant, and we will talk in a moment about how important surfactant is. And the alveolar macrophages are macrophages. So phagocytosis is cell eating. So these are phagocytes. Phagocytes are always for defense. And you could see the alveolar macrophage here in the picture is squeezing, I don't know, in or out of the tissue. And they wander around and eat stuff. They're also called dust cells because they phagocytize, they surround and absorb and eat the dust. Okay. And what's so important about surfactant? Do I have a slide for that? No, I don't have a slide for that. Okay. Surfactant is a thin, oily coating that floats over a thin layer of water, similar to what we find in the eyes, where we had that thin, oily coating, except that was over salt water. And the thin, oily coating keeps the alveoli open by decreasing the surface tension. Without that thin, oily coating, when the alveoli flatten out, when they empty of air, they would stick. And then you would have respiratory distress syndrome, which we're about to talk about. Respiratory distress syndrome is not enough surfactant. And the alveoli collapse and stick shut. And this causes exhaustion. Not like had a long day exhaustion, like dying of lack of energy exhaustion. And so it takes so much energy to pop the alveoli back open with every single breath that it makes the simple act of breathing exhausting. We have in the note set that breathing normally takes at rest like 2 to 3% of your energy. And so respiratory distress syndrome, when there's not enough surfactant, the less surfactant there is, the worse it is, makes it hard, makes it not energy efficient to breathe. All right, let me move my picture here. Okay. There we go. Let's move me up. Okay, so normal pattern. We have an epithelium and a connective tissue with a basement membrane between them, and that's the body membranes. So we had the cutaneous membrane where you have the epidermis and the dermis and a basement membrane between them. The serous membrane, epithelium with connective tissue, basement membrane between them. There were two more. So the respiratory membranes are exactly the same but completely different because there's actually two epithelia with a shared basement membrane. Dun, dun, dun. So it's the exception that proves the rule. So the respiratory membrane is literally the thinnest membrane in the body. And the two parts are the alveolar cell layer. So here's your respiratory membrane. Their bracket looks like a bracket. And the capillary endothelium with a shared fused one basement membrane between them. So you have a simple squamous epithelium, a one basement membrane, and a second simple squamous epithelium. And this is the least amount of tissue you can have to diffuse the gases across. The gases that we care about here are oxygen and carbon dioxide. As you know, when I say oxygen, I'm talking about oxygen molecules, not oxygen atoms. And then carbon dioxide, hello, what just happened? Erase. CO2. I think I tried to write the 2 first. Okay. So the simple squamous, number 1, the simple squamous epithelium lining the alveoli is the pneumocytes type 1. That's the alveolar cell layer. Number 2 is the fused basement membrane, as you can see here. Number 3 is the simple squamous epithelium lining the capillary, which is the endothelium. And then, that's a list. And then pneumonia is inflammation of the lobules of the lung, where they leak fluid into the alveoli, blocking the exchange surface because the fluids that leak into the lung don't allow for gas exchange as well as this respiratory membrane does. So that causes the bronchioles to swell, which increases resistance, which decreases flow. Okay, and we do have a timer going. So we're going to draw these next two pictures, which are these pictures. Yeah, let's whiteboard it. More fun to draw it ourselves. Okay, so we're going to draw the lungs, and if you've watched the lab videos, this is all old hat. You can do this off the top of your head with your eyes closed and one hand behind your back and label it. If you can draw it and label it, you can answer questions about it. Okay, so the left lung. Maybe we should have traced it. Okay, so there is a superior lobe. It's superior. It's an inferior lobe. It's inferior. The diagonal line that separates them is the oblique fissure, and oblique means diagonal, and it is in fact diagonal. This curved indent right here is the space for the heart, and that is the cardiac notch. Okay, right lung. Okay. The right lung, as we discussed, has 3 lobes. So the superior lobe is the top lobe, the inferior lobe is the bottom lobe, and they're still separated by the oblique fissure. But now in the middle we have a middle lobe. They got real creative when they named these. And the superior lobe and the middle lobe are separated by the horizontal fissure, which is in fact horizontal. What is the horizon? The horizon is where the sky meets the sea. And it's horizontal. Okay, so that is horizontal. Now, the tops of here are the apices. Which is the plural. The singular for apices is apex. You may have noticed when the X goes plural, sometimes it goes to a C and sometimes it goes to a G. The larynx X went to laryngeo, so it went to a G. And now the apices X, when you turn it plural, it turns into a C. So there might be some sort of reasoning logic between which ones go to C and which ones go to G, and I have zero idea of what it is. If you ever find that, please let me know. It's like some words are spelled A-B-L-E, like responsible, and some words are I-B-L-E, and there's like some sort of logic for why, and I don't know what that is. Okay, and this one, the singular is base, and the plural is base is, which I think y'all can handle. And that's the bottoms of the lung, and the bases of the lung sit on, come on, I want to change the pen color. Killing me, Smalls. Sit on the diaphragm. Okay, they're separated out so that I can draw them. Now, next question, how do you spell the word diaphragm? There are wrong answers here because there is a sneaky silent letter in the word diaphragm. And y'all are my students. And my students know what they're talking about. And you will spell diaphragm correctly. In lab, there are very few times that one letter can make it absolutely wrong. And missing the silent letter in the word diaphragm is one of them. Timer says time. Well, we're going to spell diaphragm. How do you spell diaphragm? D-I-A-P-H says F. R-A, silent letter. G, M. So if we're pronouncing for spelling, my elder has trouble with the spelling. So we pronounce for spelling. So we have diaphragm. If you need to remember where to put what sneaky silent letter, it's that one. Ooh, I drew a star. Can I do it again? Almost. Nice. Okay. Sneaky silent letter of the diaphragm. So the bases of the lungs are literally suctioned to the diaphragm. And that's how, plot twist, things you're going to learn that I'm not supposed to tell you yet. When the diaphragm moves down, it's the suction between the diaphragm and the lung that pulls the lung down with the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is a dome of skeletal muscle, and when it contracts, it gets smaller, which pulls the dome down. So when the diaphragm is relaxed, it's up, and the lungs are smaller. And when the diaphragm contracts, it pulls down. And because of this suction, and the suction is because of the pleural membranes and the negative pressure in the pleural space, but we'll get there. It pulls the lungs down. And that's how you inhale when you contract your diaphragm. But we'll finish that thought in another video. But for now, let's finish the drawing. So this is the front of the left and right lobes of the lung. Now let's draw the medial surfaces. Those are kind of the lateral surfaces. So the medial surface, let's do the left first. We've got cardiac notch, and then the part that's on the diaphragm. And then in the middle is the hilum. And the hilum, and you can spell it H-I-L-U-M or H-I-L-U-S, and those mean the exact same thing. There's not singular, plural, or anything here. The plural is actually hyla, H-I-L-A. But hilum or hyles are both the same word, same meaning. Just, I don't know, used interchangeably. And so this is where your blue pulmonary arteries and red pulmonary veins and your primary bronchi, all the tubes are going to go in the lung in one place. If you recall the fist picture in the balloon, okay. This part right here where the fist goes into the balloon will be the hilum or hilus. So the whole rest of this is covered in the pleural membranes, the serous membranes, the visceral parietal pleura, except for here at the hilum/hilus. Okay. And the lobes, you've got the superior lobe on the top, the inferior lobe on the bottom, and the horizontal, oblique fissure. Oblique fissure left. And now let's draw the right, which is slightly more complicated because there are 3 lobes. And it's bigger, so, and then sits on the diaphragm. And then let's draw the hilum. That wasn't supposed to. Hilum. And then you have coming down from that the oblique fissure, inferior lobe, superior lobe, horizontal fissure, middle lobe in the middle. No surprise there. Okay. I need a post-it note with some bright color. Okay. There we go. So we finished that part, and I have that set up to where we will start next time, the blood supply to the lungs. So, yeah, we'll leave it here. Yeah, let's actually go back to the actual picture of what they actually look like. So superior lobe, inferior lobe, oblique fissure, superior lobe, inferior lobe, oblique fissure between the superior and inferior. The middle lobe necessitates a second fissure, the horizontal fissure, and it does sit horizontally. You can kind of see it is kind of horizontal there in the body, and the oblique one is definitely diagonal, excuse me. Okay, and then from the inside, you've got the hilum slash hilus with all the tubes. That's where all the plumbing goes in and out together. Apex, apex, plural apices, base, base, plural bases. Inferior lobes on the bottom, superior lobes on the top, oblique fissures separating them, and then the horizontal, actually that was probably oblique. Yeah, that one's oblique. And then the horizontal fissure separating off the middle lobe from the superior lobe. So yeah, we'll start with that picture next time. Okay, so this has been A&P 2, lecture test 4, video number, I think, 3. And we did page 5 and half of page 6. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. The education must go on. Dr. J out. Command, Control, Escape.